Hey everyone, welcome in. This is Eyes on the Prize, the debut episode. I'm so glad you're here. I hope everyone, is doing the best they can right now. Obviously, a difficult time. I hope everyone's doing what they can to stay safe, stay healthy. Wishing everyone the best out there. And hopefully I give you some sort of entertainment or informative knowledge here with Eyes on the Prize. This is, again, the first episode, but it's something that's been in the works for a long time. I've had a lot of people come to me, hey, why don't you start a podcast in this particular sport? Why don't you start a podcast in esports? And all I've really wanted to do is do a podcast where I interview people I find really interesting and cool and awesome in the sports, esports, entertainment, whatever sort of industry I run into. And so that's what I'm doing here. So what you're going to hear in this first episode, the first guest is Kofie Yeboah at SB Nation. I don't even want to give him a title because he's kind of creative everything at SB Nation. You see him on Twitter at Kofie. And we had a great conversation about, how he got involved in the industry in the first place, his current program with John Boyes, the Fumble Dimension, and sort of where he sees the industry going in sports and esports and other worlds. And then the second interview is more, I guess you could say, timely. That interview with Kofie I taped a few weeks back, meant to be evergreen, but Scott Warfield, managing director of gaming from NASCAR, comes in, and by gaming, he does things in the betting world. He does things in esports, and we talked about what NASCAR and iRacing are doing right now in the esports world. They put on a broadcast, the Pro Invitational Series, and iRacing. That's a racing simulator. iRacing and NASCAR together put a broadcast last Sunday on FS1. Did over 900,000 viewers. So incredible waves being made by NASCAR in the esports world. So again, this is the first episode of Eyes on the Prize. Enjoy. All right. Kofie Yeboah has made it out here. I asked you for your title before. We don't even know what it really is. It's something at SB Nation Labs, host of Fumble Dimension, king of the internet, maybe something like that. Something. But Kofie Yeboah is here. I said I wanted you to be one of the first guests on this podcast, and I know I said this to you, I think when we met once before, that you are my favorite person on the internet, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not lying. I'm not sucking up to you. You're holding that title right now. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, thank you. Early days. Jury's still out. Yeah.
You're still young. Jury's still out, and that is kind of where I want to start here. I know we'll get into Fumble Dimension and everything like that, but with you, and I've been following you since you were in college, and I believe you're from Raleigh, North Carolina. All right, I want to make sure I get that right. What was the come up like? What is young Kofie like in Raleigh, getting involved in the internet and everything? What is young Kofie like back in the day?
You want to start in high school or college?
Let's start in high school. I mean, what were you like in high school?
Okay, so in high school, I was a spotter we had our radio show for our high school football team, and I was a spotter and then for the radio station. And then I would go on at halftime and read off stats and do all of that. And I was also a track runner in high school. So I won states twice in the 100-meter in North Carolina.
Did not know that.
Yeah. And I was looking for colleges, I was looking for places where I could run track at. And Maryland was actually my last choice. So I took visits to NC State. I went to Virginia Tech to visit, just being like, oh, hey, maybe I can run track here. And then there's also journalism. Then my senior year, I tear my hamstring, completely ruin it.
Which one?
My right one. Completely ruin it. And my season's done for it. And midway through, I'm like, well, I don't really like track that much anyway. So I should probably pick a college where it's just journalism. And so that's
that's what every kid should think about.
And that's where Maryland gravitated to me for the sports journalism program. So I get there, I applied to the student newspaper, and I get rejected my freshman year. And me being the petty freshman year me, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna make my own website. So I went to 4 people from our hall, from our dorm, and I was like, do you guys want to start a sports website? And they were like, yeah, you know what? So we called it The Left Bench, and by the end of the first semester, we had 27 or 30 people on the website. And then we recognized that we needed a little bit more order Because it was at the beginning it was just like a write whatever you want kind of site, but then we realized that, like, okay, this is a little too wild and chaotic even for me. So so I ran that site for 2 years, and then I took a step back my senior year because my summer freshman year, like that internship, I interned at USA Today Sports.
I've heard of it.
And then maybe you've heard of it. I worked with For the Win.
Yep.
and USA Today Sports. And then my sophomore summer, I worked at DC United, where basically what I did was I made Vine highlights and put them on Twitter when Vine was like still popular, RIP. And then going into my senior year, I worked at ESPN's The Undefeated as an assistant editor.
Who'd you work for there?
I worked for, when I first got there, it was Vince Thomas, and then he got let go mid NBA Finals. So then I reported to Danielle Cadet, who is no longer there either. She was there still there when I left. So for 7 months I reported to her, and I worked with Rhiannon Walker, and that was really cool. And then SB Nation called me December, January, and I knew Katz for years.
Michael Katz.
I knew Michael Katz. Sorry, Michael Katz. I knew Michael Katz for years, and he came to Maryland for multiple panels for my freshman year and my sophomore year. And whenever he would show up, we'd talk, and then I'd update him on what I was doing, and he would ask me questions on what I'm doing there and everything. So then he called me. I was like, okay, I'm going to make this move over to SB Nation. So then I've worked at SB Nation. I started January 2017. I was 21. Then I graduated from college in May. So I was working a full-time job and still in college. So then I graduated. Then full-time I stayed in D.C., the D.C. area. And then for 2 years, I was a social media producer. And I did that until like April or May of 2019, where John, Boys, and Ryan were like, oh, John's getting his own department. He wants you to be a part of it. And I was like, oh, say no more. Definitely going to join that. And so that's where we've been now. I moved to New York in July, and we've been working on Fumble Dimension ever since. So that is my journey, like in an abbreviated version. In a start of a podcast.
That
is my background for those of people that are listening and don't know who I am. That's a good background, I think, in my opinion, for me.
So I wanna backtrack because you gave the full explanation there,
yeah,
and I said for me, I started following you before you were just at Kofie on Twitter. It was an old time Kofie Yeboah days, and what I didn't even know you were in college at the time. I'm 2 years older than you, so I was just out of college, and like just recognizing that everything that was going on, you had, whether it was a meme, whatever it was, you had something funny ready. When did you know you were good at the internet?
So when I didn't know I was good at the internet until my junior year of college, where I wasn't old enough to go out, like old enough to be like 21 and go out, and then I dabbled in Greek life a little bit, and then I just like left it, So there was this point where I was like, okay, I don't know what else I'm gonna do with my free time, and I was like, I guess I'll make memes. I'll learn how to make memes, and this is when I had less than 1,000 followers. So my goal was like, let me get to 1,000 Twitter followers. So NFL Sunday, I had Photoshop, and I was just like, okay, let me learn how to do Photoshop. 'Cause I didn't know how to use Photoshop until I got to being like, okay, let me make these memes. Let me put this face on someone else's body. Like that was like the beginning of it, and then people started liking it, and then I started going more into video memes and all of that, and I was like, people like these? That's crazy. And I didn't know that at the time, but I did know that there had to be a point in my career where I should focus on Twitter. I should focus on building my brand, because Twitter has, now I know this, but I had a hunch that Twitter would be my best resume for me. I mean, me going to college is cool and all, but like I think that it's better to show like what I can do on the internet. I can share these articles. I have this following that like appreciates my work, and that like resonates more, I think, to certain like outlets and business people, you know. And especially on the so SB Nation had the social media producer application, and one of the prompts was what like show a link to your best tweet, and I was like, oh, okay, well,
Game.
come on now, yeah, you know. But so certain things like that is that after that junior year of college, it was like, okay, I need to work on brand building, being personal for me, and that's when I learned that like I was actually like not bad at the internet, you know. It's like internet's a hard thing to like be good at, you know, and it takes a lot of practice. So there have been a lot of bad, awful memes, and you know, that I've made, you know, and I apologize for it, but you know, you live and you learn.
But I mean, you have an impressive, I would say, hit rate, and you know, the volume that you're putting out along with that rate is impressive right now. I know what I deal with is like I tell people I put out a lot of shots. You know, some people say, "Oh, I saw your tweets are going viral or something." I'm like, that's because you don't see the 60% of them that do nothing. But I feel like right now you've got you kind of have mastered it. And one thing that you were telling me, you know, when you were starting at SB Nation was you were on a schedule and you had to, you know, work certain times and you're watching a lot of live sporting events. I mean, what was it like, that decision in your mind to go ahead and basically be working a full-time job while still being a full-time student?
Man, I still don't know how I did that. I mean, I just told my parents like this holiday break that I was working full time.
They didn't even know?
They did not know. They thought I was working part. They thought I was working part. If I told them I was doing a full time job while in college, like I told them it was like part time, whatever. I told them like if I told them I was doing a full time job while still being in college, they would have been like, no, we're focused on. They probably would like have tried to stop me. So I just
and your mom is a big part of your Twitter presence.
She's important. It's important. My parents are both engineers, so when growing up, it was hard. Sometimes we'd have these arguments because they were concerned because they didn't know much about the field I was getting into. Like my mom doesn't. She never played sports. My dad played soccer, but they had never really knew about the industry, so they would always be precautious. They were like, go get good grades. They just like did the blanket stuff that they can tell their kids because they didn't know that like what the industry was about. It wasn't like go make sure your Twitter account's top tier. It was like go get good grades, all of that stuff. So yeah, that was just an interesting like thing, you know.
What do they think about your Twitter presence now? Do they follow you?
My mom does. My dad doesn't have a Twitter account. He barely has a Facebook account, like all of that. So sometimes my mom will send me tweets of like me being like out there, and I'm like, and she's like, I'm very concerned about potential future employers. She'll send me like a tweet, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, you're not wrong, but like it was funny at the time, and I'm like, okay, mom, I'll calm down, and that happens like every other week.
I mean, I'm sure I deal with it. You know, I deal with my mom kind of being like, or it's like a joke, you know, a newer school joke that my parents are kind of like, I didn't get this. And I have to be like, Mom, I don't know if this was intended, or Grandma, you know, I don't know if this was intended for you to quite understand. But for you, you know, I talk about your success and you go, you know, starting really entry level at SB Nation, but working your way up to the point that you were moved recently, within the year, I think, from Maryland, from the DC area to New York, living in Brooklyn now, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The validation of you moving, how did your parents take that, and how did just your friends and everyone around you?
Oh, it's been my parents have always supported me, but it was just a thing that like now that they're seeing that I'm making this move to New York, like I'm making the move to New York and I'm not like struggling financially. Like I don't ask my parents for much, and stuff like that. So the fact that they're like, oh, he's being like self-sufficient, he's in New York, like he was right about certain things, you know, back in the day, like maybe he was right about not having a 4.0 GPA mattering for the industry that I was in, because that would be what we always talk about. My mom would be like, oh, you try to get the best grades possible, and I'm like, as long as I'm like not like tanking, like I feel like it'd be fine because I had at the time I had the Twitter account, I had all these internships, I had these people in the industry that were like mentors to me. They still are. They're still mentors to me. And I was like, I have this. Of course, I have my GPA and everything. No one's asked for it since I graduated, but I do have the mentorship. I do have the base. I do have the experience. I do have the Twitter account. I do have all of that. And like I was like, okay, well, my parents realized that in college I was building that early. And if my grade point ever tried to take a .5 hit, then I'm definitely willing to do that and sacrifice for the relationships that I still hold dearly to this day. You know.
I think trying my best on your sweatshirt right now is kind of the perfect
oh yes
way to finish that.
This is my favorite. This is my hoodie from one of my favorite creators, Jarvis on YouTube. I was just like, I have to buy this. It's like. He had like a champion line. It's really good, and I just love the sweatshirt. I just love the sweatshirt.
And you're trying your best. And so now you're in New York. You know, I want to hear who those mentors were at some point, but I assume John Boyce is one of them, who I've never met in person, but also semi-worship. Welcome to College Football Saturdays.
Actually,
or he wasn't your mentor.
Me knowing John has been. It was the start. Me knowing John was like the start of my YouTube channel.
Okay.
When I started my personal YouTube channel, and one time he tweeted out the Barry Bonds video that I did. That was one of the first early interactions I had with John, and so even though since we were in different areas, I didn't. Really
and we should
John.
Your YouTube channel. You talking about
my personal YouTube channel.
Yeah, which you kind of I guess relaunched essentially or have built up in the last year or so.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting that SB Nation also has allowed you to do that and has valued your individual presence.
They were really so the thing about that is when I was on social media, I wanted to get into video, and I told multiple people I was like I want to get into video, I want to be involved with the video team and everything, and I got to a point where I realized that I'm doing social media, I'm working a 9 to 5, well a 5 to 1 at the time, and if I want to be on video eventually, I don't have the video experience to show for it right now. Like I did some newsroom style videos because I was a broadcast journalism major. I have those from college, but ever since I got out of college, for like a year and a half, I like didn't make anything besides like memes. So I decided to sit down and make the YouTube channel just as a way of like, okay, I can show that I can make this, and I just want to make stuff that I'm interested about. So when John tweeted out the Barry Bonds like video that I made, it was like very flattering because we hadn't really like talked we haven't really talked as much. I don't even think I met him face to face until like I went to New York this like March. But ever since like we tweeted out that video, he's been like a huge supporter. We've had like multiple discussions and all that, so he really has been a mentor. Like after I got to after college and all that, he's been a really good mentor. My college mentors were Kevin Blackistone,
Northwestern.
Yeah. So one time, here's how I got my USA Today internship. So Kevin Blackistone, he teaches a class at Maryland. I never took that class because I was broadcast, not print. We had there's like a cafe area, and we were both in line for coffee, and I turn around, and it's like in Kevin Blackstone's there. And I'm a freshman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think we've met, but I don't think I'd met him before. But I said, hey Kevin, really nice to meet you. And I was like, I have this website that I would like for you to like critique or something. It was the college website.
Yeah.
So I think I gave him like, did I have business cards at that point? I gave him something to be like for the website, and I was like, all right, he's not going to check out the website. And he like a week and a half later, he like checked out the website, and I was like, oh, he actually checked out the website, you know? And then he got me in touch with Mary Byrne, who's no longer at USA Today, but she was in charge of USA Today Sports at that time, and that was before.
What did Kevin say after checking out the website?
I think he was impressed with the fact that as a freshman, we were able to like organize and make a website and all. Like, was the content good? Probably not. Like, it was we were using a default WordPress theme, hadn't even bought the domain yet. But I think that what he liked was the initiative to like make your own website and have like the wherewithal to like put effort into it while still being in college. So he's been a mentor for me. I think other ones, Michael Katz, obviously, George Solomon, who was the director of the Sterling Povich. He's about to retire soon, but he's always like come to bat for me and all of that. But those are a few of the mentors I had in college, honestly, where it was like really like cool to have and be like, oh my God, these guys are.
Well, I don't know if you know my Kevin Blackistone story, which is that so this was my senior year at Northwestern, right before. So you're 2 years younger. So this is about a year after I guess you met Kevin. Yeah. So I was at a conference, Blogs with Balls. It was now the people who run the Outside Game ran Blogs with Balls at the time, and so it was in Chicago the week of the first NFL draft in Chicago, and so I was able to go while I was a senior in college, and it was like I remember seeing. I always tell a story. Zach Harper had like his own table at the bar during happy hour, and I thought it was like the coolest thing. And people are probably like, "Who's Zach Harper?" But at the time, I was like, "Oh my God, look at this!" Yeah. But Kevin Blackistone couldn't make the conference, but he made the happy hour. He showed up, and I was like, "I'm just gonna stick around and try to meet as many people as possible." And it was right at the end, and he was like, "Oh, did I miss everything?" And he was there with a friend from Northwestern. Who he was visiting while he was in Chicago, and I said, Kevin, I'm a big fan, and I go to Northwestern. I'm just about to graduate, and he said, sit with us. We're having wings and beer right now. So I sat with Kevin Blackistone and his friend from Northwestern, however many years before he graduated, and we just sat there. And I asked him questions about what it was like at Northwestern, and we talked Northwestern sports, and could not have been a more
he's one of the nicest, most thoughtful people I've ever met in this industry. Absolutely,
Kevin, you've left us for Maryland, but Northwestern still feels that. But so you come to New York for Fumble Dimension, which for people that don't understand, and I said we're at OSNYC right now, where they're trying to put on the best video game events and everything video game streaming. We're in their streaming pod right now, but you guys basically try to break video games, and John, I know this comes from John Boy's having Breaking Madden back in the day, which I used to watch, miss it, and then your history in video games as well. How does this idea get pitched?
So John pitched it.
Okay, so you?
No, because John. So basically, I think SB Nation just has full trust in John Boy's. In terms of whatever idea John Boyce has, it's gonna get.
I mean, he is SB Nation Labs, right? He just shows up and he just shows up every day and just decides to be creative.
Yeah, he's just great every day, and it's just so the craziest thing is that I'll tell you a story. Is that so when I was trying to get onto the video team, so whenever I have a proposal or pitch, I'll make a slide deck or PowerPoint, and I made a 25 slide PowerPoint on what Kofie could do on the video team at SB Nation and all of this. And this was at the point where Ryan Nanny was the editor-in-chief. So I go up to New York to have this meeting. I sit down with Ryan, and John's in the room. And I'm like, why is John in the room? So I had this PowerPoint. All set up, and then Ryan's like, "Okay, I'm here to tell our idea. John's having a team, he's making a team, and he wants you to be on it." And we didn't even go through my PowerPoint. I was like, "You know what? Your idea sounds better. Forget my PowerPoint." That was it. I had a whole 25 slides. I just closed the laptop, and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a better idea. I'm gonna do that because." I was like, yeah, this is perfect.
And honestly. So what's your day-to-day life like now?
Whew, it varies, So my day-to-day life, I sit across from John. I sit next to Alex Rubenstein, who is the co-host on Dorktown. And so basically I have consoles all around my desk, And depending on
dream.
And depending on what stage of the show we're on, I could be just doing a lot of editing, a lot of sound stuff, or I could be doing a lot of data entry. Or so for the 2K video that we did where we made an entire draft class full of 40s, I was basically using an Elgato to record all the gameplay, and then we would like fill in the draft class, and then we just take notes and all of that. And that was my job, and I did that for, I want to say, good like 3 weeks, because we went like 40 years into the future. And then we were also writing out scripts and like doing all of this mid hand. And then the NFL head coach video that we did was 17 hours of Madden football film, right? And I was like, you had to write the script and all of that while doing that. So that took me about 2 to 3 weeks to do on there. So that was my job for 2 weeks, was watching NFL head coach and like making, and like,
which has its pros and cons. Watching
and cons, it, you know, it's like, it's fun, and it's also like, you have 17 hours of footage now. You have to decide which ones make the video, and I pick the music as well. So it's like you have to decide which clips make the video, what parts are important and what parts are not. So while it seems like a lot of it is just like, oh, you're having fun all the time. So it's a very deliberate. It's very like strategic. Everything is like out there and stuff. So it's like harder than just like watch football then make a video.
It sounds like 17 hours of NFL head coach. It's like, isn't that the dream? You know, I'm thinking in my head as a kid,
yeah,
the time you got to play like a franchise mode or as much of a season was, say, you have a week, like a holiday break or something. Yeah. It's like, I am going to wake up every day, and I'm going to play, you know, MVP baseball franchise mode and do a fantasy draft and do all this stuff. And then you get to do that for a living now.
I'm extremely lucky. Like, and it's so interesting because it's hard for me to explain what my job is to like regular people that are not even in sports, or just some people in sports. It's just hard to explain what I do because it changes so often, and that's what I love about my job. It's just like it changes every like 6 weeks. It's like, okay, this happens. All right, what's our next idea? We'll pick this game. We'll try this, and then we map out. Well, yeah, we map out like what we want to do, and like, bam, that's like my project for 6 or so weeks, and that's like the best to me.
I know. So you guys had Calvin Johnson. You know, unfortunately, he's it's just been a tough run for Calvin Johnson, the Lions.
Oh, yeah.
You guys, and then you have this video. I don't know when this podcast will come out, if the video will already be live. The golf club, you took that game and you created a golf course that is, I don't know. It's probably basically impossible.
We created, it's doable, but we wanted our fans to give us things to put on this golf course, because, you know, one thing at Explanation that I wanted to kind of be more in charge of for our YouTube channel is that we don't really have an interactive video game. Mm-hmm. We don't really have an interactive video series right now. We have like Rewinder, we have Beef History, we have That's Weird, and those are all amazing. And sometimes like for Rewinder and Beef History, they'll always be open to like ideas and suggestions from the fans. But I think that for Fun One Mention, I wanted to make an effort to be like, hey, everybody can be involved in this one video. Mm-hmm. And that way, like, we have all these people that are now waiting for like to see if their creation makes the course, mm-hmm. and like for all of that. So it's just a whole thing of like building up hype that I just like love now. And
I know I feel like I saw you quote tweet someone who said, Kofie from SB Nation, and it feels like you have fans now.
Oh,
what's that like?
They're
there. They're out there.
They're there. I'm still not gonna. I still don't believe it. Like they're there, and it's so flattering and so cool because, you know, I've been trying to just get off of that reputation that I just have a Twitter account. You know, building the YouTube channel. It was so like people know that like I make more than just like the Twitter account, and I've tried to gravitate away from the Twitter account like reputation and all of that. And it feels so good that people are like, when's the next Fumble Dimension coming out? I liked this. I get DMs from our fans being like, oh, I really love this episode, and then they give their like ideas for another Fumble Dimension, mm-hmm. and stuff like that. And it's really flattering to see that people are like finally like, oh, Kofie's like actual like Kofie's videos that he puts like weeks into, you know, those are people are like excited for those, not just like the meme videos that take me like all of 15 minutes to make. You know, it just feels different.
Well, I say you must have the best bookmarks in terms of and
Oh,
be able to navigate your bookmarks, because I have, you know, I know I have dozens if not hundreds, and like you have to scroll through, you know, where everything is.
You know, I actually like Twitter desktop better than Twitter on my phone.
It's underrated.
You know, I feel like people one time I told people that I use Twitter desktop a lot, and people are like, why? And I'm like, well, I have this is before Twitter bookmarks was a thing. I had a folder of like memes, popular screenshots, all of that, and then I switched computers, and it was like, oh, I lost all my memes, not like important work documents. It was like, oh, I lost like these great Photoshops. They're buried in history now, you know, and it's just funny to be like have all these bookmarks, have all these funny videos, and it really is interesting to study like meme culture and all of that. I think Lil Nas X is the best like case study for all of that, which like makes it just so interesting. Just like he went from being a meme account on Twitter to he made those the choose your own adventure tweets was on his old account. He got suspended from Twitter, came back, and then like continued like making memes and stuff. Then memed his own song. He memed Old Town Road, his own song. Like he would do that, and now it's like the song it is today, and he's the person he is today, which is like such a fascinating thing to think about. Because I was there when I was there when the first account. It was something. He wasn't called Lil Nas X at the time, and it was a choose your own adventure Twitter thread, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, this guy's a genius. Like, holy, you know, it's like that. So, meme culture's fascinating, honestly.
He's like Jesse, right? Making a comeback from Twitter after a account suspended.
Oh my god, I feel so bad. Like, Jesse used to be my roommate, and
Jesse Karangu, we're talking about.
JMK TV show, I think, is his handle now, and he got suspended because like he kept tweeting like Olympic highlights.
That's the line. That's the line.
That's the one where it's like you can't come, like Twitter's not going to be like let you come back from that.
I knew how strict the Olympics was because I was working at the post game during the Rio Olympics, and we were like, let's just like all of the good highlights, you know, we got to be ready and put them into articles. And you know, because I knew that NBC Olympics and NBC Sports were putting up the clips. But it was the only time I've ever seen this on Twitter, that if you embedded the clip, it wouldn't let you play it in a separate article.
Yeah, it used to be NFL had that too.
NFL had that, you're right, yeah.
NFL had that for a while where it was like, oh, I want to add this to an article, but then when you clicked the tweet, it would send you somewhere else. And it was just like so bizarre at the time, because it's good to see now that NFL and ESPN have all opened up to new social norms, because there's a time I think people forget that there's a time when ESPN didn't have any videos on YouTube. Like they were all just natively on the old ESPN site. And then there's just a flip, and now you see all these ESPN show snippets on the ESPN YouTube. They have the NBA The Jump, like NBA YouTube and all of that. It's just such a like. It's really good to see that it's become like those things have become more accessible now, instead of it's like being behind a wall, or like the NFL being like, yo, you can't even like natively tweet that.
Well, let's talk. I mean, you know, there are people out there that say social media ruined everything, or you know, you see it all the time. I'm getting off Twitter. I'm getting off this social media. I mean, you wouldn't be where you are right now if social media did not exist, or at least you could.
You're not wrong.
Okay,
you're definitely not wrong. There's a part of me that wants to, every year I want to be off of Twitter less, you know, because I want to focus more on the work that I'm making for Fumble Dimension, and I'm working on videos and all of that. But there's always a part of me being like, okay, if I didn't like work on my Twitter account in the early days of me being in college, I wouldn't be as, not popular, but I wouldn't be as secure in like what I'm doing, you know what I'm saying? Like I know that now that since I have like X amount of followers and I've like had this reputation, I have a nice, really good community around me that I've built just in the industry and people that just like my work and all of that. Like it was important because Twitter helped me get to know a lot of people in the industry through other journalists in the industry, you know? And that was always helpful. Now there's like the bad side of Twitter now where it's like you can tweet like a whole fact and then like people just try to attack you for just saying that. Remember, because I think last year like 5 black hat coaches got fired and I just like tweeted that out and like
it's like that's an opinion.
Yeah, no, I was like that is not even an opinion. Like that happened. Like I made the list. That is a real thing that happened and people were just like on me, and I was like, dude, that's not what I'm saying. And I was like, after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm just like off it.
It definitely exists. I know exactly what you're talking about. Like I'll tweet facts about teams that I grew up loving, trying to be an objective journalist, and people are basically like, you hate, you're such a big Red Sox fan. I'm like, what? Because I said like one thing about the Yankees that was a fact about their record in
exactly.
August or whatever it is. It's like, I mean, so that stuff happens. But like what I was saying, the internet. Look, I've benefited from it. You've benefited from it. I think a lot of young people who would have, before the internet, needed to, work their way up. And instead of just the eyes of the employer seeing you, the world sees everything you're doing. What are some other positives that you take away from the internet right now?
I think that it's the easiest way to discover talent. Mm-hmm. It is easy. There's a guy. His name is Deacon. He showed his resume reel on Twitter, and it went viral and all of that. So everybody, and we went to NABJ. I saw him at NABJ. I didn't know him until.
Did you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I introduced myself. I knew him as so I knew him before he made my friend Harry introduced us. I think in New Orleans, maybe making that up, but that is something that I can.
It happened.
It feels tangible. So then Deacon, he makes this Twitter reel, and it's like his broadcast stand-ups and all of that. It goes mega viral. Like everybody shares it, and I saw him. I pulled up on him at the Adventure at NABJ. And we did talk about it, and he was just like, yeah, it's crazy that when I showed up here, everybody in the industry knew me because of that reel, and that's always a good thing because it's like now if Deacon graduates, doesn't make that reel, and he goes to a conference of black journalists, how many people would just know him off face? It's glad that he put himself out there and everybody recognized his talent before he went to NABJ, and thanks to Twitter and all of the retweets, that just shows how powerful the internet can be. You can be talented, but the internet won't notice until you put yourself out there to the internet. You know what I'm saying? And it's just it's just interesting because we have all of these people, like Omar Raja, formerly from House of Highlights, now is at ESPN, that doesn't happen if Omar doesn't make the House of Highlights Instagram account. That happens because of the internet. It's not like Omar applied to do that. It's just Omar did it and had the initiative to do it. And that's the great thing about the internet is that it champions initiative.
Well, I think Omar, you could argue that the reason, we were talking about the Olympics and the NFL and kind of the lift on a lot of embargoed content, ESPN moving things from its own website to social media. I mean, you can point to Omar as the catalyst in creating House of Highlights and it getting bought by Bleacher Report as one day when they make the 30 for 30 on, the rise of sports social media, that has to be at the forefront of things.
I think it because the interesting thing about Omar's House of Highlights is that it started at a time when nobody knew the power of Instagram video. Nobody, because there was a point where Instagram didn't even have video back in the day, and then Instagram was like, okay, 15 seconds, and then okay, 60 seconds, and then went, okay, Instagram TV, and throughout all of those changes, Omar was at the forefront of like capitalizing the most on each of those changes. And that's why it's such a fascinating thing that, like, yeah, it makes sense that someone our age that understands the internet would take it and champion the internet and turn it into something that's huge, because that's not something that comes down from like the top offices. They're not going to understand the social part. Now it comes from like people our age that use the internet every day and are ingrained in everything like that. So that's like that's also another fascinating thing to study, how it got popular. 'Cause I can't like, I wasn't there for all of it. You know, that's something only Omar can like talk about, how poppin' it got, and like in the amount of time, like how long it took. You know, that's something that like, it's just wild. But it's a fascinating phenomenon.
Have you met Roger Sherman before?
No, I have not. I know he's an SB Nation alum, and we do follow each other on Twitter, but I have not met him personally.
I mean, he's at Roger, you're at Kofie. You guys both cut your last name at some point.
Yeah,
in that Twitter.
that was necessary for me because I just wanted that handle so badly.
Who had the handle?
It was like a Dutch grandmother whose last tweet was in like 2012.
So how'd you get it?
So I was at NABJ, and there was a Twitter happy hour. So I went to Twitter happy hour, and someone was like, I guess someone from Twitter was like, "Hey, how's your Twitter experience?" And I was like, "Actually, there's something I do want to talk about."
Was it TJ?
No, it wasn't TJ.
TJ Adeshola? No.
It wasn't TJ. I'm not gonna disclose the name. It wasn't TJ though. And they were like, "Oh, okay, we'll get that fixed for you." And I was like, "What?" They were like, "Yeah, we'll do it." And I was like, "Okay." It took like 10 minutes. I was like, "Oh my god."
Were you like still in that room?
Yeah, I was still in the room. It was crazy. I was just like, oh wow, I didn't know that was like. But I mean, if you are around all these Twitter employees and stuff, like it was cool to just like be like, "Hey, I have this thing," and they're like, "Oh, we can fix that," and I'm like, "Wow, this is so cool."
So networking is good.
Networking works. Yeah, that's the moral of that story. Networking works. You know, all that.
One topic I want to get to. So we met for the first time, I believe, at the NBA 2K League draft in 2018. Mm-hmm. You were still living in DC at the time. You had come up for that.
Yes, I was there for like 2 days.
So that was, for me, that's been such a launching point into esports. Has been the NBA 2K League and working with the NBA Twitch channel. What are your thoughts on the esports landscape right now? Because it's such a buzzword to a lot of people. And I know on the inside, I've seen certain things that maybe people don't quite understand about the industry. You've dipped your foot in a little bit, especially just on the video game side of things, just playing video games for a living right now, as entertainment. What are you noticing about esports?
I'm noticing that it's more and more like it's easier to talk about now. It's easier to talk about over the years because when I was covering the 2K League, I was doing it because I had to tell my bosses, being like, hey, NBA is having a 2K League. I would love to cover it, be out there, get the jump on everything, And at first, it was so hard to do because it was like, okay, is this a sport? This is video games, or is this basketball? So then our NBA editor was like, oh, this is basketball, and I was like, it's kind of video game, And we had those like looping conversations for a while, but I eventually stopped covering the 2K League because while I was still being a social media producer at the time, so it just got to become too much. But it was fun to have have all the information and have go there and have Adam Silver be there for the event. It was so cool to just do and be around, And the only 2 leagues I really follow are the 2K League and the Overwatch League, because I think for the Overwatch I gravitated to, and that was the easiest thing for me to just jump into, pick a team, and they had a regimented schedule and everything. And I watch Overwatch more than I do regular sports now. Honestly, I will, because being a social media producer, as soon as we're off the clock, you're like, okay, I don't want to see a basketball or football for. But then I get home and I'm like, okay, let's see what the Philadelphia Fusion are doing against and NYXL. Can they finally break the mold or whatever, and that was just so refreshing to me, that esports, and I can talk to people. I found a bunch of people on Twitter that like esports as well. I think that the fact that it's easier to talk about and explain to people, it's refreshing, and that it's not like seen as like video gaming back in the day used to be like, oh, live with your parents in your parents' basement. But then whenever people like talk to me like that, and they're like they're older from a different generation, I'm like, well, you can say that, but this guy made $100,000. Like, that's his salary. And they're like, his salary for playing video? I'm like, yes. What were you saying about parents? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, what were you saying about parents' basements again? Like, it's just so cool to just be like, I like watching video games now. It's like it's just such a fascinating thing that I really want to get like more into. But the thing about certain leagues is that you won't understand what's going on unless you play the game.
Well, I was going to say Overwatch League. Did you play Overwatch before Overwatch League started?
For 2 weeks, I watched Overwatch League and didn't play the game. So I was like, okay, Overwatch League is on. Cool. So for a week, I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I had like the list of like the heroes and everything, and the broadcast crew does a really good job of explaining to people that don't play the game. That's what they're really good at. They have the talent when they're especially when they're on, like when they had like shows on ABC, they would be like, oh yeah, this, and they'll like explain what like the maps are. They'll explain what like the objective of the game is, because it's a lot of chaos, a lot of like just a lot of sound effects, a lot of like just projectiles everywhere on the game. It's just a lot of chaos. But it became easier to me when I bought the game and I played it for a month while watching, and it helped me basically learn how to play the game and then learn how to like watch an esport. So those like really kind of go hand in hand.
I mean, it's all like, you talk about ABC. Do you read the tweets that people have when it's on ABC? Yeah. The comments that people
like,
have?
Not a sport. And I'm like, dude, come on. If it's on ABC, come on. Like, you gotta see the vision. Like, it's on ABC. Not like ABC, like family. It's on ABC, actual ABC, like the main ABC. Like, just give it a chance. Mm-hmm. Like, if you just don't understand how like powerful these esports events are. Madden was on the CW. They had their own CW documentary. Imagine going from like watching Arrow and The Flash, and then you turn on CW and you see Madden. That's like the same thing. It's just like, I love to see like how it's rising like throughout. And the thing is that if you say, I don't really consider like esports as one thing. I consider like it's on a game by game basis, because each game is a different, like, the FIFA League is different from watching CS:GO or from watching Metal Gear.
And the people Gears watching those are different.
Yeah, there's all different. I think people try to just like jump into, and they like categorize esports into like just one thing. And it's just like, there's fighting game esport. There's so many different subcategories. It'd be like, for me, like just being like trying to analyze music, like just talk about music, right?
Well, it's like you wouldn't ask someone to necessarily specialize in knowing country and hip hop. You wouldn't expect someone to be. Yeah,
exactly. You wouldn't. If for music, you would like, oh, there's alt rock and then there's like classical. It's like, yeah, it's the same. It's all music, but at the end of the day, there's so many sub-genres and genres and all of that. And I think that it's been easiest for me to just find a game. I found one game. I found Overwatch, stuck to it, and I like branched a little bit. I was like, okay, I'll watch some Tekken. I'll watch that. Okay, it's cool. I've never played Tekken, but it's fighting game stuff. So yeah, I've watched some Fortnite events. I don't really like Fortnite, but I like still watched it. But I knew what was going on, because I was like, okay, building and shooting.
You talked about the Overwatch. If you want to just like one team, you just can watch that one team. how do you feel about the local model for esports? Very similar to traditional sports that you're going to have, because I tell people, I'm like, you're going to have a situation where maybe it's all going to be in one arena, where you have 5 teams from New York who all play out of the same arena, whether that's Knicks Gaming, the New York, New York Overwatch and Call of Duty teams and whatever it is. Like that's what I think it might happen. What do you think is going to happen with local esports?
I think if I'm wrong, I think Overwatch League Season 3,
it's going to go local.
They're all local. But the thing about local is that they have teams in China and Paris. There's a London Spitfire. Like that's all over the place, And I think that's good for. It's going to be good for like a local fan standpoint, being like, oh, I can go like with my friends and see the London Spitfire. I can go, if I'm in New York, I'll see the New York Excel, the NYXL. London's coming to town, or like. My only thing is that I don't know. It's not my place to say, but if I had to think, like, I feel like that would tire. I don't know if that would tire out the gamers, and a lot of the gamers that play are also streamers.
That's true.
So like, how does that go into place? I don't know, because I'm not. It's not my place to say, but that would be like my question to have.
So to my understanding is that the teams, especially those teams like you said in Asia and Europe, they'll take road trips essentially. Like it won't be like, they're going to play one single match. London is going to go to Dallas and, play. So I know they're thinking about that. I thought that's interesting what you say about streaming. I don't know if you know this. Bryson DeChambeau is a golfer who's playing in Abu Dhabi today, and last night he was streaming while eating steak, so that's crazy to me that you have this golfer who's streaming Fortnite the night before he's got a tee time, and he's just, he's alone in a hotel room in Abu Dhabi and streaming with perfect quality because he's going around probably with a kit to the world. So streaming is also its own beast. In terms of esports for streaming, I think this goes back to people who don't know as much about the industry. They group esports and streaming in the same thing. They're like, oh, Ninja is esports. Well, he's doing a lot. He was a competitive gamer at one point, but he's doing so much streaming right now. What do you notice about all of that?
I think that a lot of esports players do stream, but you're not there are certain people that just stream certain games. We've noticed that a lot of Overwatch players, some of them retire just to do streaming, and that's interesting to me because I don't know, I don't think there's a pro sports equivalent of that. There's no Luke Kuechly retired, but he's not gonna do drills.
He's not doing recreational football.
He's not gonna do football in his own gym. You know what I'm saying? It's so interesting to be they're in video games. They are there's more than one pro avenue. You can be a pro streamer or a pro gamer. Whereas an athlete, it's you're a pro athlete. You could become an analyst afterwards, but then the athlete part, But I think Chiney Agumake does both. She's an athlete, and then she's also a pro basketball player, and so she does that. So I guess that's the closest thing to that I can think of, honestly.
Yeah, she's doing ESPN. She's playing professional basketball. She's doing a ton of stuff. I want to talk on the before we leave video games because I think we're both avid 2000 sports video game historians in a way. So if MVP, and by the way, we're working on this. You could be listening to this, you could be watching on video. We're using OBS. We're gonna have to figure out how to stream MVP Baseball 2005 here at some point. But
I'll bring the equipment.
We'll figure all that out. What is lost? Maybe obviously the tech has gotten so much better, and everything's so much more realistic. What is lost from those 2000 sports video games, or were we just so innocent that we loved them because we were teenagers?
I think that a major thing that we lost is the fact that we lost a lot of titles. Back in the day, EA Sports, they had an arena football game. They had a college baseball game, and they were willing to we had NASCAR games. They were willing to go be up and beyond and all of that. I think that when Ultimate Team and the DLC stuff got introduced throughout all of sports gaming, and then all those those titles they wouldn't be funded for I think that that's when it kind of lost its magic. When it was more, for sports games at least, it was more okay, you would invite your friend over and play 2K. you know, you'd invite your friend over and play Madden. And now it's more like...
And it was all local because there was no
local,
online.
All local, all of that. And then that's when online came. It was like, okay, you have your own online team. Cool. But then now, if you pay $10, you get better players than the next guy. And then you build this ladder and all of that. And that just added a whole nother element to it that I think it just consumed gamers and stuff like that. So it's hard to find, and for those it's like hard to find like new titles being made that like, and it's hard to like, I think it's harder for like certain people to like give newer titles a chance, honestly, where it's like, oh, we have a new like golf game or like soccer game, or I think NBA Playgrounds is the best like example of it, you know, where like, you know, back in the day, NBA Jam was an arcade game. You'd go to it, you'd play it, whatever, and like it got introduced like recently, and it was just like, I play 2K. That's my basketball game. Like, you know, it was just like harder for it to just like get into the fold of like all of the like players playing certain games and all of that. It wasn't like, oh, okay, and then back to like, 2K basically has like that arcade style gaming stuff as well. So it was just like the similarities like overlap too much.
Well, I mean, I definitely feel that it's, we used to play so many more games. I feel like
We did.
Like, you know, we'd have, you know, in a cabinet of games or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Obviously, everything was $59.99. Like that was it. There weren't necessarily add-ons.
Yeah,
There wasn't anything
there
cheaper
weren't-
than that.
there were not.
But like, you know, I remember I had to get, you know, convince my parents I had to get Madden and NFL Blitz.
Yeah.
Like I had to get 2 football games because it was basically whatever mood I was in. Like if I was, you know, it was a frustrating day, I just needed to jump on guys at the end of plays. Like I needed
Right.
NFL Blitz,
Yeah.
or like I needed to play MVP Slugfest, and then you'd get I'd get the more traditional game too.
I think the biggest, one of the bigger ones is when EA Big stopped making games. You know, it was like NFL Street. You had NBA Street. I don't know if
NBA Street and SSX Tricky was EA Big also.
EA Big. And when NFL Street and NBA Street, like, there was like this lull of like arcadey sports games that like also like were involved with pro players and stuff like that. You know, I mean, there's been MLB Slugfest, there's MLB The Bigs on the Wii, you know, all of that. But I think that was just like the beginning of like a downhill into less and less being made, you know, and also like mobile games now, like the rise of mobile games and stuff like that, and there were rise of like flash games and mobile games too, where I think that some people like gravitate towards that instead of like actual like making like disc video games and like, hey, let's have big developers make this for console, you know. If I had to guess, you know, that would be my thing.
MVP Baseball 2005 goes down as, you know, one of everyone within our age puts it in their top games. Does it have that legacy because the series was cut after that, or was it that good?
I think it has that legacy because the series, because it reminds a time where like baseball games were like.
And you've done a YouTube
great.
Video on this.
Yeah, I've done a YouTube video on it. I think that for a lot of us, I think for our that generation, that was a very solid game, and that was the last pro baseball game from EA Sports, you know. And that, because I think we just held like EA Sports to its being like, we all like recognize how iconic EA Sports in the game. We had all of that, you know. And then I think for our generation, switching brands was like a difficult thing. And then like now MLB The Show, it has that like brand, like whole brand name and all of that. They have it on lock and all of that. So I think that was one of the things. I think just like the fact that it was like a fun, easy to play baseball game. There was no like right analog stick swinging and making everything. Like, it was just like simple for us like as kids to just like, okay, we know what we're doing. This is like a baseball game.
I was joking because of everything going down with the Astros. Like, I remember playing that game, and my brother and I would have rules essentially.
Yeah.
You couldn't use. We just decided you couldn't use the we played GameCube.
Yeah.
You couldn't play I think it was the right stick was if a pitcher had a fifth pitch, it was the right whatever it wasn't. It was called, I don't know if it was right trigger or whatever it was called, right bumper,
Yeah.
because it made a noise, so you knew the pitch was coming.
Oh,
So if you played each other, because you could hold the cursor, and if you held it there for a while, the pitch would disappear. So then you were basically manually. So you were making sure that that your opponent wasn't stealing signs by seeing where you were throwing the pitch and what pitch you were throwing.
No, on Xbox you had the black and white buttons, so like those don't make noise. So that's
it was
the first
different.
time hearing about
GameCube, it was like if you clicked that, I mean, you played. I'm sure you played enough GameCube to know what I'm talking about. That those buttons made noise.
Yeah.
So we just were like, you just at your own benefit, you're just not throwing that pitch.
Like, it's just not fair.
It's like the Astros. They'd be sitting on the curveball if that was the case.
That is one of the funnier scandals, honestly.
I mean,
in my opinion, it's funny because it's funny how long it took for them to get caught. That's funny.
Well,
I'm just like, dang, they've been doing that for months, and like it took a while. It just like, no, it took a what?
No, it took years. I mean, they were doing it for years. Since 2017, and it was Mike Fiers, the pitcher.
It took a former player to just be like, all right, guys, you've had enough fun.
Well, didn't they realize at some point not everyone was going to be on the team? Like, if you're on another team and they're cheating, aren't you kind of like, hey, wait a second?
I don't think you think about that, though. It's not something you think about, honestly.
Like, this could be a problem. Someone will eventually, or if we keep going,
I mean, if you do it like for multiple seasons, like then sure you're gonna a lot of loose ends are being dealt to other teams, but it's just a wild story.
That's a wild story, and I know you tweet a lot. You've tweeted a lot about things going on. The NFL's got so many, whether it's like we mentioned the black coaches, the Rooney Rule. We could talk about instant replay and what's a catch and rules. What in sports needs to improve right now?
Sports?
Like you're watching the landscape of sports and what people are saying about sports. What needs to get better?
I don't. That's such a vague question. I'm not sure.
Left vague on purpose.
I think I've always like championed, like baseball has had a thing where it's like wanting to be more interesting, wanting to appeal more to like certain demographics and like championing fun, but then Tim Anderson flips a bat and the base is clear. Like the bench is clear, and then like I think he wasn't suspended. But I don't know if he was suspended.
He might have been. Now that I remember, like there was something about it.
But it was enough for a bunch of people being like, oh, they shouldn't have acted like that. I'm like, well, you can't have this whole social media let the kids play campaign, and we're still on that. So basically, I think my thing is for these leagues to actually be about what they promote. That's like the important thing for me. And it's like baseball. It's like, oh, we look at how fun our sport is, and then the incident after incident after incident happens, where it's just like, at least like get the sport down first before you promote a certain like lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? Like that. It's just like that's probably what I want to like. That's what I want to like do. Like want to like just see change.
Do sports have to get younger? And I think we've seen it the best with the NBA. We talked about House of Highlights before, and just like, do sports have to work better at appealing to a younger audience?
I don't think so. I think that the cycle of parents bringing kids to games, and that cycle always helps a little bit. I don't really think that. Well, baseball definitely needs to. Well, baseball's working at it. That's why I can't say that because they are trying, and a lot of these leagues are trying. Like the NBA is trying, NFL trying. All these leagues are trying, but it just gets to a matter of like, is your game marketable enough? Is your game or sport marketable enough to work socially? You know what I'm saying? And not every sport is. I don't think. And it's just a matter of like, okay, if you realize your sport's not doing this, and what can you do to repackage it or make it more fun, And that's always a challenge that these leagues have.
Before we wrap up, I want to talk about your own sports fandom, and you talk about, bring future little Kofies to games. I can't figure. I mean, you mentioned the Panthers before. You're from North Carolina, but then you've got this Pistons and Bengals fandom. What's going on with all that?
All right, so I am a Pistons, Bengals, Mets, Carolina Hurricanes fan. Now, Carolina Hurricanes is the easiest one to explain because I'm from Raleigh, and Carolina, like the Hurricanes play in Raleigh.
They're the only team in Raleigh.
Yeah.
Are you an NC State fan also?
No, I grew up a Duke fan because my dad went there. My mom taught at NC State. She still works there. But I really haven't. I've really let the college fandom go because I went to Maryland, and Maryland hates Duke. So when I first got to Maryland, I was like, they were like, where are you from? And I'm like, North Carolina. Are you a Duke fan? I was like, no. And then Duke won the national championship would
have been your sophomore year.
Yeah, sophomore year with Jaleel Okafor. And I felt like nothing towards it. I was like,
numbed.
Okay. Like I wasn't, because after that point I was just like so like far away from it. I was like, you know what? Yeah, sure. Like I'll tune in to watch like Duke games now because it's like the easiest one to like just go back to and be like, oh, Coach K is still there. Cool. But the Bengals, my mom came back from a business trip and she got me a pennant, a Bengals pennant.
Okay. Was the business trip in Cincinnati?
It was in Cincinnati,
okay.
Definitely. And I was just like, okay, well, I'll root for them. And then like a decade and a half later, like my sadness is still from that just one pennant. I stuck with them, honestly. Now as a Mets fan, I grew up not having cable. I grew up not having cable, so whenever we get the MLB on Fox on like Saturdays, I think it was Saturdays. On Saturdays, maybe Sundays, I think it was Saturdays, we'd get a lot of Yankees games. And I was like, you know what? I don't like this. I picked the Mets. That's why I picked the Mets.
I thought you'd pick the Red Sox out of that. They'd be playing the Red Sox.
I was a Red Sox fan also, like a Red Sox and I was like, pick one. And I was like, okay, well, the Red Sox are winning too much, so people will think I'm a bandwagon. So I dropped that. So now I'm a sad Mets fan, you know. And then Pistons, I just like Ben Wallace's afro. That's basically it.
It's like, you know, I feel like people would look at this and be like, why does this guy make himself unhappy like this, choosing the Bengals and Mets? Pistons, I understand because I'm sure when you talk about Ben Wallace, there was a time that the Pistons, it was like, they're going to be good forever.
Honestly, I think it's more fun being a fan of teams that aren't good that often. Because sometimes, like I watched a couple Super Bowls with Patriots fans, and they don't look like they're having fun. Like this Patriots fan, they watched the Rams play, like Patriots-Rams, and then after the victory, they just like were just like, okay, well that was cool. And I was like, are you serious? And they're like, they're just so used to. I feel like they're so used to it now. Like certain fans are so used to it that it's just like it doesn't even really matter. But like that Eagles Super Bowl where half the city like was on fire and they rioted. Like the Eagles aren't constantly just good all the time. Like it takes like more like takes more preparation, more like hope and rooting for them instead of just like being like, oh yeah, I guess Tom Brady. We'll see you guys in the playoffs because we haven't missed the playoffs in like an entire decade. You know, so it's just like it's different. So as a Pistons fan, it was just like cool to make the playoffs again. You know, as a Bengals fan, it was like, oh, can we win a playoff game? No, we can't.
You won a game this year, a few games.
We won a game, but we
hadn't
won
one game.
We hadn't won we won 2 games actually.
2 games.
And we hadn't won a playoff game in like we've lost our last like 7 playoff games. But it was this season going 2 and 14 was so much less stressful than like us going like 11-5 or 10-6 for like those 5 years and losing all 5 wild card games. Like this has been the most like chilled. Like yeah, my team sucks. I can laugh at it. Like it's fine.
Now if I were you, you know, Joe Burrow is probably going to go through the combine and go through everything. Like I would just want to saran wrap him, like keep him. If I'm the Bengals, just say
Joe
like,
Burrow
don't go outside. Just make it to the NFL draft, and then we'll put you in training camp.
And you go on you join like one of the worst teams. So, I mean, like I'm
Will he be the pick?
I hope.
There's no one else picking ahead of you guys.
Yeah, exactly. That was just get that year. This year was like the first game we lose to the Seahawks by 1, and I was like, all right, well we still get in like And
Yeah.
it was like, oh my
Great
God.
first game.
I was like, oh my God. And we beat the Jets somehow. That was just funny. It was like, okay, let's not try to ruin this number 1 pick we got going on. We have a really good thing going. So yeah. But no, I hope that I wish him all the best in Cincinnati because he's good. But he's going to need it. I'll say that.
All right, well, maybe we'll be having a different conversation this time next year, or maybe in a few years. We'll give Joe Burrow a few years.
Yeah.
We'll see where A.J. Green is next year. Before I let you go, just what else is going on in your life right now? I know you've moved to Brooklyn. What is life like outside of all of this work and everything? What's it like living in New York, specifically in Brooklyn?
Oh, I love it. I have like 2 pockets of like friend groups here. I have my friends that I grew up with.
From Raleigh.
Oh, sorry. No, let me backtrack. I have a couple friends that like are around, but then my 2 friend groups are my friends from college. So it was good to be like, oh, I have like 4 or 5 friends in Brooklyn, and I'm getting to know like all the friends that they made in Brooklyn. So it's like cool to find that like that community. And I have my other half is like the friends that used to work at SB Nation, and friends that like are journalists and work up here, and it's really like cool to have those 2 pockets.
What's different about living in D.C. versus Brooklyn?
D.C., the train system is not flat rate as it is here. Because when I first got here, my dad was like, do you notice anything different? I'm like, is the train flat rate? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I was like, oh, this might not be that bad, And I just like that DC, like the New York transit system, like the subway system is like more accessible, and it's more extensive than the DC one. Because DC, I found myself still like Ubering all over the place, no matter what. The thing that's better about DC is that you can see the sky. It's like DC has like they have like a building.
Lower buildings.
Yeah, they have like I think there's like a building like the buildings can't be higher than a certain height, and if I had to guess, I think it would be like for like White House security purposes.
I think it's
maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
I think it's a terrorist threat is what they're thinking about.
I don't. That's like the urban. That might be an urban legend, but that building height thing that's a real thing. So that's my favorite couple of things about New York compared to DC, and it's just been great because New York is the biggest mind your business city.
Oh yeah.
Like people think that New York is a mean place. I'm like, it's not mean. It's just like if you see some weird stuff, you just gotta go on with it.
Well, you learn here to navigate. Like you keep your head down. You do what you're doing. You know, if someone tries to talk to you, a stranger on the street, you're probably just going to keep walking. Like you don't, there's a little bit of that. It's not as nice in that sort of way. But what I think New York is like, no one has time for nonsense. No one has time for like small, very subtle small talk. Like, I remember being somewhere in Savannah, Georgia, where they like, I heard the guy behind, I was at some sort of hole-in-the-wall food place, and they said to slow down because they like the line out the door symbolized to people that it was like a legit place or something like that. Right. If there's a line out the door in New York, I'm not waiting.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's how I feel about that.
No, that's true. Yeah.
For you from a career standpoint, what do you, in the next few years, what do you want? What's the trajectory of Kofie Yeboah?
I don't know, because like, if you asked me this while I was like a social media producer, I would have had like a definite answer. It'd be like, oh, I just want to have my own show or have a show. And now I do kind of have that show. Mm-hmm. Like it's not the show that like I had like thought was possible, but now that we have like the Fumble Dimension, it's like the best thing to me. So my thing is I want to keep growing Fumble Dimension over the next couple of years, build a fan base, see how that goes, and I really don't have any like ulterior plans or anything like that. I do want to start streaming, or a podcast. I've had like it's just the whole time management thing for me, and I think I turned like the not killer instinct, but it was more like the always the need to always network that I had in college, the need to always be like doing something for my career, like even if it's off hours, you know, I've kind of like turned that off, and I kind of need to turn that back on again. 'Cause I'm still like, there's still always stuff I can do to improve the brand and improve like just who I am as a person, you know, like I do want to learn After Effects eventually, stuff like that. So I do love my like being on Fumble Dimension. There's not really a show like it on YouTube in my opinion, and it's just been great to kind of just like work towards that. But who knows what the future holds, man.
What do you have to plug before we're done?
All right, so follow my Twitter at Kofie, Kofie. My Instagram is Kofie Yeboah. I couldn't find the Instagram people, so it's K.
One day, if you're out there,
one day we'll find the Instagram people. KOFIEYEBOAH. Twitch is Kofie Plays, and subscribe to the SB Nation YouTube account and the Kofie Y YouTube account.
And where can people find Fumble Dimension?
You can find Fumble Dimension on the SB Nation YouTube account. If you search YouTube, type Fumble Dimension, it'll be like the first couple of results. So
he will keep breaking video games. Kofie Yeboah, thanks so much, man.
Man, thank you for having me, man. This has just been a lot of fun, honestly. It's a great time.
Kofie was awesome. Appreciate it so much, him coming on with me. Again, be sure to catch the Fumble Dimension as he basically attempts to do everything creative possible with video games. Now, this second interview, I mentioned it in the intro, Scott Warfield, Managing Director of Gaming for NASCAR. We talk a lot about the NASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series right now. That's professional, the top IRL, in real life NASCAR drivers actually racing in an esport that's airing on, it aired on Fox Sports 1, the first race. Next one will be on both Fox Sports 1 and Fox proper. So this is Scott Warfield, Managing Director of Gaming at NASCAR. We got Scott Warfield now with us, Managing Director of Gaming for NASCAR. And Scott, I was just joking with you a little bit because it's we were on a panel together at Hashtag Sports in New York last year, and they came to me and they said, Jeff, we want you to moderate a gaming panel. And I said, yeah, I can do that. I do a lot of esports. And they said, no, betting. I said, well, I could do that too. And when I told that story in the green room, you said, yeah, I could do that too as well. So I know in kind of the rundown of this, I said, I don't know if you saw, I said, are you a NASCAR lifer? And my take is just, could you explain to the listeners what you've done in NASCAR over the last few years and the various jobs you've had?
Yeah, I'll say this, Jeff. NASCAR is a lot of great things. Probably at the top of that, at least for me professionally, has been every time I've raised my hand and said, "Hey, I'm bored with this," or "I need a new challenge. Can I try that?" They've said, "Yes, go for it." So I started back in 2010. Kind of helping revamp our old PR group, turn it into an integrated marketing communications kind of apparatus. And I think probably one of the best in all of sports from a communication standpoint, even today. Did that for 4 or 5 years. We were bringing our digital and social rights back in-house from Turner Sports in 2013, and saw an opportunity to transition a little bit and asked to run our social media group. So built that team out from a group of one person kind of running around doing lap by lap Twitter updates to a synopsis, best in sports business kind of social media team. Added some digital content responsibilities, and then as PASPA was being struck down in 2018, moved over and started working on our gambling strategy and what that should look like for the sport. Coupled that now with some oversight under Tim Clark's leadership on the esports side as well. So all things, to your point, now gaming that can be encapsulated from both.
And let's talk about the esports, because NASCAR, obviously big in the news. We've talked before because I've been following you guys. NASCAR, one of the only, maybe the only professional sports league with 2 different esports leagues. You have the iRacing League, and then last year the NASCAR Pro Heat League launching. And what you had here was, all of a sudden races are getting canceled. Everything in the sports world, everything in the world is getting canceled for coronavirus. And then you guys somehow within really a week and a half, and really less, are able to put together this iRacing, this Pro Invitational Series. You advertise it right away as a series, So we're actually talking about multiple events. Homestead, Miami, Dixie Vodka jumps in to make it the Dixie Vodka 150, and you put it on FS1. First of all, on the inside, how did this come together at NASCAR?
Frantically building the airplane as we flew it, if you will. Look, on Monday, we had to make the most unfortunate announcement we've probably made in a long time, which was that we were postponing, at least for the next 8 weeks, our national series events that a lot of our fans across the globe, depend on every week as a source of entertainment. By less than 24 hours later, we had put out a press release with a logo saying we were launching this pro invitational series on iRacing. And we had as many details as was captured in that press release, and that's it. And hard work began, right? But I thought it was important, going back to my old, funny you ask about my kind of trajectory, right? It was, well, let's make this a PR story first. Let's start getting social media content and digital content about it. And if you build it, they will come, kind of mentality. And the fantastic thing is you had every single stakeholder, executive group in the garage saying, yes, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, let's do that. Yes. And next thing you know, we're going racing on a Sunday and trending on Twitter is number one and almost having 1 million viewers. So can't say we saw all of that happening that quickly, but that's the testament to both this industry and the platform that iRacing has built over the last decade.
Looking at it from the outside, I was thinking, how did you convince all of these drivers, whether they have an iRacing simulator or not already in their home, how did you convince them to buy into all this?
But the easiest answer is we didn't. And they use this as both training. They've used it as a development tool. I mean, William Byron, right, replaced Jeff Gordon in the 24 car. He started on iRacing. He didn't get in a real stock car until he was 14 years old. They likely would have done this anyway, right? They're at home. They're self-distancing or social distancing. Sorry. They're racers at heart. They were joining other leagues and organizing themselves. So that wasn't that big of a challenge, especially when you had iRacing, NASCAR, and Fox kind of collectively. Now all of a sudden you have a place to put it. You have eyeballs that you think are going to be there. You have sponsors that are looking for ways to activate because you don't have the real life racing. So Dixie Vodka was going to be the sponsor of the Cup race in Homestead, the Dixie Vodka 400. Well, we just made it the Dixie Vodka 150. Sponsors that were going to be on the side of actual race cars now on the side of virtual race cars. It just is a incredible business story. But it's not why we did it. We did it because it was the right thing to do for our fan base.
And I know I put out a tweet, Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon, showing social distancing, not sitting next to each other in the control room, calling that. You mentioned Fox Sports. It was on FS1. The next race this coming Sunday will actually be on Fox, both on FS1 and on Fox, Channel 5 in New York, at least. And over 900,000 is the number that we're seeing. People watched that first Pro Invitational Series race. How does that help you guys in leveraging just how successful this was?
It's that proof of concept, right? So, I think we all had some guesses. Those of us that know the iRacing platform and the realistic nature of it, the fact that unfortunately NASCAR and the PGA Tour and NBA and everyone else on hiatus, so not a ton of competition. You're a week, 2, 3 weeks into this new normal where people have blown through Netflix and Hulu and everything else they've had stored on their devices. I think we felt confident. If I would be lying if I told you I thought we were going to do nearly 1 million viewers and outperform, traditional sports, be the number one ever esports on US TV history. But, yes, that gives you now the luxury to tweak and to grow and to add on. And Fox has stepped up in obviously a massive way, committing to all of these. And now how do you continue to invest here so that you have something over the next 8 weeks, but more importantly, Jeff, what does this look like over the next 8 years?
Yeah, and I had people sending me messages who thought, they said, this looks like the real thing. And I think that's a testament also to iRacing, just how, for those who don't know, we should mention iRacing is a simulator game. So we're talking about, and not the simulator necessarily that you get in an arcade. This is a subscription-based service. This is the real deal right here. But it was so real. And I think that's what jumped out at people. And for you, what did you hear from the fans and from the people, maybe the sponsors, the people around both iRacing and NASCAR?
It's such a great point. And we run a series, the Coca-Cola iRacing series, on every other Tuesday night, which is the 40 best iRacers in the world, competing for a $310,000 cash prize, and NBC carries the final 6 races of that series on TV as well. We have it on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. We do incredible numbers on that series. But a handful, maybe a month ago on a Tuesday night, my wife walked into the bedroom and I on YouTube on the TV, and she said, "Since when do you guys do midweek races?" And I was like, "Well, this is iRacing." And she had to do a double check because it's that real, it's that authentic. And you're right, Jeff. Like it's what iRacing has invested in over the last decade that got them ready for this moment. And what we've heard from the fans is, it felt like a Sunday Cup race. It shorter windows, right? 90 minutes versus sometimes 2.5, 3 hours. But the look, the feel, and obviously what Fox did with it was just incredible. Took it to a completely new level with real life announcers and all the bells and whistles that make a NASCAR broadcast come to life. Crank It Up is a popular thing we do with Cup cars, and so you can hear the Nat sounds, and they brought that through for the Dixie Baca 150. So it's just so much creativity and innovation across the entire sport. It's just humbling to be a teeny part of it.
Oh yeah, we were getting car cams. We were getting, we had the national anthem, right? The whole production of that, I think probably brought people into feeling like they were also at a NASCAR race. Yeah. I've said this before with NASCAR esports, with both the NASCAR esports, you don't have to necessarily be a diehard NASCAR fan, which I think is a benefit you guys have because everyone understands racing. It's an easy barrier for entry in that sort of way. But one guy, you mentioned William Byron, and you mentioned the top 40 iRacing stars in the series. I don't know if he was at that point, but for people who don't understand, he's kind of the first test case of a young guy who grew up on iRacing, and that actually helped him become a NASCAR driver.
No doubt about it. I mean, he didn't set foot in a stock car until he was 14. The normal route for the Jeff Gordons of the world and Dale Jr.'s and Denny Hamlins, right? They start on go-karts when they're 4, and then they're in quarter midgets and they're racing dirt and modifieds and eventually into truck series, Xfinity, and then into the Cup. This is different. Like I know, Jeff, I see how good and how active you are on NBA 2K, on Madden, FIFA.
I'm not good at those games, which should be noted, but go on.
but I've also seen you, and I'm looking at you now. You're not going any of those.
I'm not standing up. You could see my height, but no, you're right about that.
And that's the differentiator for NASCAR is you have an esports component of our strategy where you could actually become a professional in our sport. And that is something that we have continued to lean in on. And yeah, our console experience with, the Heat 4 franchise on Xbox and PlayStation is vital as well, because that's our kind of mass market entry, and it's a low barrier cost to get in and involved, and something we'll continue to invest heavily in. But the iRacing component of which this new series is centered around is, at the end of the day, it's our differentiator to our stick and ball competitors.
$29.99 right now in the Xbox store. And that's not a plug for you guys. That's literally me I'm saying I play the game. So I have noticed that. Esports in general right now, even beyond NASCAR, you've been, as you said, you've been in this industry, in this sports business industry for a number of years now. What have you noticed about it? And particularly you guys as an example, everyone that during this sports hiatus, they're using esports in a different way. How do you think that will still be seen when things go back to quote unquote normal? How will what people are learning from esports now help down the road?
I think it's the distribution of content. It's the type of content that people will engage with, right? I mean, we look at our YouTube and Facebook and Twitch numbers for iRacing and all of those every single week. Excuse me, around our esports. But to see it pulled through on linear broadcast and to be able to hold audience and size, this is something we're going to have to give serious thought to, of what this looks like, 3, 5, 8, 12 months from now and beyond, because there's a market for it. It's fairly easy. I say that, a little bit cheek of to stand up and to do. And that's, again, a testament to iRacing's platform. But it will take some key learnings away for moving forward.
I want to give you, because I know it's a passion point for you. You work so much, when you say gaming, you work so much in the betting world for esports, for NASCAR, in the betting world for NASCAR. What are some initiatives that you're taking down the line to improve that betting as an accessory for NASCAR?
Look, this, right or wrong, and probably mostly wrong, we're the only game in town right now. And you have a betting world that is thirsting for content. I think I saw the number one bet on thing last week was ping pong, or table tennis as they call it now. There are opportunities to develop free-to-play games and daily fantasy, and ultimately possibly some real money gaming around esports. And we're seeing it from kind of every angle there.
And when NASCAR comes back, how can people bet? What are some interesting ways that people can bet on NASCAR?
Yeah, I mean, right now, traditionally, when you're talking about our Cup Series, there hasn't been a ton of innovation and creativity around the sport in terms of sports betting. It's been race winner and series champion, which are really tough bet types to get right in our sport because of the parity. So what we've done is trying, we partner with Genius Sports out of London, and they're a data provider, and they're taking our timing and scoring feed and developing a live in-race product so that eventually, right, long-term, you'll be able to bet on the next fastest lap, number of leaders, number of lead changes, and small micro kind of prop bets that keep you engaged for longer periods of time during an event. But even in the short term, I think what you're going to see through like a partnership that we just announced a couple months ago with Penn National Gaming, are things like top 3, top 5, a trifecta, a super try, exacta. Those are all bet types that would be really interesting in sport NASCAR.
So last Pro Invitational Series, or not the next Pro Invitational Series event coming up this Sunday. Why should someone watch this NASCAR iRacing event?
If you're a sports fan, you like drama, unpredictability, all the things we like about the NBA, the NFL, NASCAR, PGA Tour, I'd say give it a shot. It's 90 minutes. It'll be a break from what has become an anxiety-ridden time, and I think all of our lives is probably safe to say, fear of the unknown. It's fun. It's drama-filled. Denny Hamlin and Jeff Gordon in week 1 going door-to-door to the final turn of the final lap. Give it a shot. If you don't like it, tune it out. But I have a feeling if you give it a whirl on Fox or Fox Sports 1 on Sunday, heck, we might have a new NASCAR fan.
Scott, thank you so much. I know you're working hard through all this. Stay safe, stay healthy. Wishing the best to you and your family.
Same to you, Jeff. Appreciate the time, my friend.
Thanks. I appreciate everyone who tuned into the first episode of Eyes on the Prize. Kofie, Yeboah, Scott Warfield. Appreciate you guys so much for coming on as guests. To the listeners, if you're trying to follow me, I'm at Jeff Eisenband on all forms of social media, JEFFEISENBAND. We'll have a lot more content coming, especially as we, maybe without some sports and various esports for right now, but I got a lot of ideas for guests and people that can tell some great stories as we try to find some sort of entertainment in this obviously very difficult time.